Wow. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You did that remotely.
Yeah.
That was very good.
Wow.
Look at Bill.
We're moving into the holiday season. Let's just take a moment to invite the bell. So good morning and welcome to the Mindfulness Tree Meditation community on this holiday time. And so we're going to start out with our meditation. It's going to be the second part. Well, we'll do the entire thing of the 16 breathing exercises. So, and these are on page 85 and through 87, so that at home, it's something that you can actually take a look at and meditate with. One of the things that I do, my experience in meditating is I've been reading the 14 mindfulness trainings of engaged Buddhism of Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'll be saying more about this later. I read a couple of them and then meditate on them. And so using some reading, that's fine. Whatever works for you to settle you. And, spiritual reading is one of the things that Buddha recommends. And meditation teachers would say that. So, but what we're going to do is go through this. We'll do our walking meditation, and then I'll give you a little background on engaged Buddhism and Thich Nhat Hanh so that we have maybe a fuller understanding of the tradition that we're working with. So again, we invite the bell. So listen, the sound of the bell calls me back to my true home. So as we come to this place to gather together to meditate and to support one another, we arrive and settle. The body that carries us through so many activities is the body that we bring to our sitting meditation. And so within this body, we carry concerns and worries, but we also carry joy and happiness. So just take a moment to settle and to just be aware that we're a body as well as a mind. So breathing in, I am aware of my in-breath. Breathing out, I'm aware of the out-breath. Allowing thoughts to slow. Just experience perhaps 3 long, deep breaths to help with settling. And breathing in, I follow my in-breath all the way through. And breathing out, I follow my out-breath all the way through. And as the breath begins to just go back to a normal pace. Just notice there is a beginning and an ending on the in-breath, and then a beginning and an ending on the out-breath. And now breathing in, I am aware of my whole body. And breathing out, I am aware of my whole body. Joining breath with the body. Just noticing if there's any tension that you have brought with you. So now breathing in, I calm my body. And breathing out, I calm my body. Allowing the breath to release any tension that you might have been carrying. Now breathing in, I feel joy. And breathing out, I feel joy. Even in dark times, joy can arise. And it allows us to smile in the midst of whatever might be happening. Breathing in, I feel happy. Breathing out, I feel happy. Sensing the ease and the freedom that comes with joy and happiness. As we're with our body, breathing in, I might be aware of a painful feeling or sensation. And breathing out, I'm aware of this painful feeling or sensation. It doesn't have to overwhelm when we greet it. So breathing in, I calm this painful feeling. And breathing out, I calm the painful feeling or sensation. Embracing it tenderly and allowing it to just rest in this time. Now moving on to the third set, or the third tetrad. Breathing in, I'm aware of my mind. Breathing out, I'm aware of my mind. It's noticing what might be there. Be joy. It could be a worry, sadness. But whatever is present, just allow it to be. Breathing in, I make my mind happy. Breathing out, I make my mind happy. We gladden the mind by inviting good seeds to manifest and grow. Even in the most difficult of times, when we plant these wholesome seeds, we reap benefits, not just for ourselves, but for those in which we interact. Breathing in, I concentrate my mind. Breathing out, I concentrate my mind. Maintaining our awareness with a single focus on the object of our concentration. And that object right now is our breath. Concentration leads to liberation from the notions and opinions and thoughts that might hold us back, bring about insight. Breathing in, I liberate my mind. Breathing out, I liberate my mind. With this exercise, we untie all of the knots in the mind. Calmly, we observe the mind in all of its subtleties, freeing ourselves from the obstacles such as sadness and anxiety about the past and the future, and allowing us to be liberated in this very present moment. Now, with a mind that is free, we move to set 4 on impermanence. Breathing in, I observe the impermanent nature of all things. Breathing out, I observe the impermanent nature of all things. This concentration on impermanence is a deep and wonderful path of meditation, realizing that everything passes away, transforms, is not solid. And there's freedom in embracing impermanence. Breathing in, I observe the disappearance of desire. Breathing out, I observe the disappearance of desire. With this, we see the true nature of our desire and the objects of our desire. And we know that happiness doesn't lie in attaining these objects or in our hopes for future accomplishments. We observe clearly the impermanent nature of all things. They're coming into being and they're fading away. Breathing in, I observe cessation. Breathing out, I observe cessation. Even our notions and our ideas will cease. If we allow them to cease, we can see directly the ultimate reality and what is present in this moment. Touching the wonderful true nature of the way things are. Not making them into something that we want them to be, but allowing them to see. And finally, breathing in, I observe letting go. Breathing out, I observe letting go. This exercise helps us look deeply to give up desire and attachment, to give up fear and anger. We don't let go of reality, but we let go of our wrong perceptions about reality. And the more we let go, the happier we become. Asking, is it true? I don't know. Letting go. Now resting in open awareness. So in closing, I'd like to just share with you the words of a song, part of the Plum Village tradition. And it's called Happiness is Here and Now. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Nowhere to go, no thing to do, no longer in a hurry. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Somewhere to go, something to do, but not in a hurry. So thank you for your practice. And we're going to move to walking meditation in the sanctuary, but I'd like to welcome both Sam and Mena. Hello, Mena. It's good to see you. Mena is part of our Florida group, and so it's good to have you.
Thank you. I'm
You're
glad to be here. Happy Thanksgiving.
so nice to see you.
Thank you.
What we're going to do now is we're going to leave the room to do walking meditation for about 10 minutes, and then we come back.
Okay, I'll be here waiting for you guys.
Hey, feel free to walk at your house.
Okay. Will do.
Okay. I think we're going to be okay with you things here. You want to?
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
So, okay, so in 1963, he coined this phrase, engaged Buddhism or socially engaged Buddhism, which it grew out of 10 lectures he gave during the 1950s, and he put them together and finally published a book in 1964 that was called A Fresh Look at Buddhism. Now, in that part, he was in Vietnam. And in Asia, there had been going on a lot of reform movements starting in China, Sri Lanka, India, and different parts of Asia, because and especially with the colonialism in Vietnam, it was advantageous, and like in Sri Lanka too, in India, that it was convenient for the colonizers, of course, that were European, to let Buddhism be very passive and peaceful and just sort of be in the background and not really very organized. But there were some reformers that said, no, this isn't what the Buddha intended. And so there were movements, especially in China, then moved on to Taiwan, that Thich Nhat Hanh was very influenced by. Taiwan really started what was called humanistic Buddhism, Buddhism for the whole world. But the engaged Buddhism of Thich Nhat Hanh is just a wee bit different, and I'll say something about that later. But he was also influenced very deeply by Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. So you see those connections, you realize, this is something that has more to it than rituals and doing rituals for the dead and that sort of thing. So what I did, my professor had asked me to do the intellectual journey of Thich Nhat Hanh through his life because he died in 2022. So he lived a very long life, born in the 20s. But Kara Julingo, remember the book that we did by her? She was a nun in Plum Village tradition, and she wrote an article that was called In the Midst of the Storm, and describes 4 key phases of Thich Nhat Hanh's life. And I think this will help us as we develop as a Sangha and such to see where he went with this. He describes how as a child he loved storms and would find himself right out in the middle of the action. He loved being in a storm as a child. And as a young monk, he sought out the storm by delving into action and really responding to what was going on. But in his later years, he described how he would observe with awe the storm. So he wasn't, that youthful, get in there, get my hands dirty type of thing. And so he moved from active engagement to a more mature, meditative and observing stance. So something for us to think about, as we move into a different stage of our life, where are we, in the midst of that storm? So the 4 phases, the first one was from 1950 to 1966. And it's described by Kara Julingo as one cell in the body of lay people and monastics resisting the Vietnam War. So definitely tied to a time and a place. And this phase was characterized by active engagement. And the focus of this time until 66 was developing this concept of engaged, socially engaged Buddhism and forming a small band of followers. Now, and in 1961, he got a fellowship to go to Princeton University to study comparative religion. So he was gone then for that year. And then the next year, he was invited to go to Columbia University to do lectures and to study. So he was gone for 2 years. But when he came back in 63, that's when he coined the phrase engaged Buddhism. And it was interesting because in 63, he really addressed what was going on with the Vietnam War, and you can imagine for those of you that were around, what was going on then. But in 64, he formed what was called the Student, Youth, and Social Services, SYSS. And it was those individuals who were really concerned with the poor, the people who had been affected by the war, and they wanted to do something. They wanted to respond. And so there were 6 key people that became part of his sort of small band of folks. I'm in my lecture mode, aren't I? Mark, I can tell when Mark's looking at me, it's like a paragraph or less.
This is fun.
But what was interesting is Sister Chan Kong, if you ever go to the Plum Village website, she's still alive. She's in her 90s. She was one of these original people. There were 6. There were 3 women, 3 men, and they weren't ordained at that point as nuns and monks, but they worked together. And so they're very, very important because one of the women actually was, what's the word, immolated herself. She set herself on fire. What's the word? Immolated, yeah. In Vietnam, and received a lot of, just because she was so worried about the war. So she was from this group that he founded. Also in 66, he formulated the 14 mindfulness trainings. Now we've talked about the 5 mindfulness trainings, but he formulated these. The 4th is awareness of suffering. And so that is key for what he did. And then he also formed the Order of Interbeing, this organization that was committed to study, action, and that sort of thing. Now, in phase 2 was 66 to 82, and that was building a new community and working with refugees. Because in 1966, he came to the United States and met with Martin Luther King Jr. He really talked about the protest against the war. He went to college campuses and that sort of thing. Well, gaining support. And at that time, when he went back to, he couldn't go back to Vietnam because the authorities exiled. They said he can't come back. So he went to France. And so he went to Paris. He organized what was called the Paris Buddhist Delegation and participated in the Paris Peace Talks. And after I think at that time, Martin Luther King Jr. nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't win it, but he was nominated. But his focus during those years was establishing a community and working with all the refugees that were coming from Vietnam. So very focused at that time. He founded a place called Sweet Potato Farm, which was about 150 clicks from Paris. And the purpose of the farm was to provide a place for the refugee activists to rest, restore, and heal. So he was really quite focused in those days. Now, phase 3 was 82 to 88, and this is when he established Plum Village in the south of France. And it's called Plum Village because it's got a bunch of plum trees. And that's how they sort of made their sustain themselves during that time. And the focus was providing training for lay people. And his primary aim was the continual work with refugees and preserving traditional Vietnamese Buddhist culture. So it was it was sort of a narrow focus in the 80s. He wasn't interested in having students or ordaining anybody during that time. And his style was very laid back, more informal, and he even in the early days didn't wear robes, even though he was a monk. But he wanted to found a haven for activists to participate in meditation, walking meditation, and being in the present moment. And so that was the focus of it, and strengthening this order of interbeing, which was mainly lay people at that time. So that was to 88. The final phase was from 88 to 2022 when he died. And that was establish a community and a continuing legacy. And so in 1988, Sister Chan Kong, who was with that original 6-person group, was ordained, fully ordained as a nun in the community. And this brought with it an establishing new traditions and ways of addressing suffering. And he saw that the primary focus was for activists to be able to rest and renew and heal, with the monastics providing that place. And now he became much more formal and systematized. He also looked at ways of making Buddhism more relevant, and really formulated the 14 mindfulness trainings to speak to current times, and also they're to be revised every 10 years. So if you read them, you see it talks about technology and travel and things like that. So he established 11 practice centers all over the world. They're monasteries, but they're called practice centers because he wants people to come to practice. And it was beyond working with those who were activists for refugees. And it turned into environmental issues, women's issues, ethnic issues, gender issues, peacemaking. And there are 3 practice centers here in the United States. One is in California, Deer Park Monastery outside of San Diego. Another one is in upstate New York, and it's called Blue Cliff Monastery. And then there's one in, of all places, Mississippi. And that's Magnolia Grove Monastery, which is really, I find that very, very interesting. So he was finally able to return to Vietnam in 2005. And then he stayed, and he had a stroke in 2012, and he passed in 2022. And so his followers now carry on his legacy. But this is the part I wanted to be sure that we got to today. There were critical turning points for him that I look at that really tells about that his movement was not just providing a place for people to meditate, that it's so tied to action. So there's in this book, Sister Chan Kong writes the preface, and it's wonderful because she talks about those early days of working directly with him, as a young woman before she became a nun. But she talks about in 1963, he delivered a 3-point proposal to the Executive Committee of the United Buddhist Church of Vietnam. They call them churches. In the United States, the Buddhist churches of America, they call them churches because it was a word that they used. The first point was that the Buddhist church in Vietnam had to speak out against the war, both to the south and to the north. And so that was his mandate to them. The second one was to build an institution for the study and grounding in full Buddhist tradition and teachings of the Buddha. And then the third was to establish training centers for social workers to apply Buddhist principles in their social work. And with my reading, I believe that these form the foundation of the movement that he did. So the first is speaking out, and the second is study of Buddhism and such, and the other is social service to the community, to the world, and really addressing issues. And so I think that anytime, most of the time when we read the books of Thich Nhat Hanh, we think, oh, he's a great meditator and helping us to do mindfulness. But if we can keep in mind that really it was grounded in activism. And so I was thinking about this before I prepared for today, that like in the Lutheran Church is very involved in social services, Lutheran social services, disaster relief, and really speaking out against injustice. Our bishop of the church really just has no problem speaking out. And so we as a group don't have to say, oh, well, we need to speak out about this, but think about where in your community there is the opportunity to speak out against injustice or work toward alleviating suffering. And I think of this church, my gosh, they do Trinity's Table, they're giving food all the time. They're always, they open the church for people to come and that sort of thing. And how that follows the model of Thich Nhat Hanh, because it's the activism, the study, because like at this church, there's always the study of scripture, worship and coming together, but then the activism, the acting on. So speaking out as well as acting. And I think it's a wonderful model of how the church should be, how the synagogue should be, how a sangha should be. So think about that from your standpoint. But one of the things too, in the 14 mindfulness trainings, they're really quite involved. I'm using them as part of my meditation in the mornings as I'm reading through these and his explanation of them. But with the awareness of suffering, what he always encouraged was it starts with yourself. Recognizing your own suffering, your suffering of being late, I didn't mean to call it suffering, but using you as an example, but that for one to be aware of suffering in the world, one has to come to grips with their own suffering. And that comes to the Eightfold or the Four Noble Truths, awareness of suffering and what causes suffering and how one is relieved of suffering. So I'm going to just say a couple more things. But also with the order of interbeing, he saw the need to organize. So the order of interbeing actually exists, and people are ordained into the order of interbeing. I'm in the first stage of taking the 5 mindfulness trainings that I did with Venerable Tree Ho. And if I would decide I want to become part of the order of interbeing in a more organized way, I can apply to do that. And that means reciting the 14 mindfulness trainings once a month. So it's an actual organization, and they meet and they're organized. So one could be a Lutheran and still be part of the order of interbeing. But mindfulness, walking, meditation, and breathing, really form a life together. And that's why we meditate, we walk, and we breathe as a Sangha. So one of the things I want to end with is that what really impresses me with the engaged Buddhism of Master Thich Nhat Hanh is that he saw it as always changing and always adapting. And so, but yet it was grounded in Buddhist principles and the tradition of the teachings of the Buddha. And something that I heard while I was in California and heard a lecture by someone who's involved in Taiwan with the humanistic Buddhism, that Master Hsing Yun, who founded one form of the this humanistic Buddhism, she brought up different issues and such, and one was LGBTQ. And Master Hsing Yun said, as things become accepted in society, so too we accept. Because there was a time in Buddhism that they didn't ordain nuns.
What did you print out, Ramona?
What? What was that? Did you say something, Mena? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And so as things change, and I thought, isn't that interesting how it's how does society change, then we embrace that. And then we know of many institutions that push it away. The suffering that's caused by, the many things that we see in the news today. So basically, he captured the essence of engaged Buddhism with this. Buddhism is for the sake of the world. Buddhism is not for the sake of Buddhism. Sort of like Jesus, the Sabbath was made for human beings, not human beings for the Sabbath. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Any questions real quick before we end? Yeah, it really helped me to, preparing for this exam really helped me to put it all sort of in perspective. Any comments from our esteemed colleagues online? Yes, Sam.
I'd like to make one note.
Yes.
You mentioned the beginning of Thich Nhat Hanh's travels here in 1963. In 1963 was the West Virginia Centennial. West Virginia became a state in 1863 when they left the state of Virginia because of slavery.
Yes.
To me, those things sort of came together.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for that. And I like to, in fact, we went by the Capitol building this morning. I sort of tipped my hand to Abraham Lincoln's statue, and that's a reminder of that the speaking out, the Civil War. Yeah. Thank you for that, Sam. Yeah, maybe he came through. You never know. You never know. But thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Because it really, so then as we talk about the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, we have sort of the perspective. So we're going to end with inviting the bell. And sorry, I'm not close enough to the computer to turn on the musician thing, Mena. She's the one that taught me how to do that. So. So I had something I was going to read to you, but I'm not going to. I'll send it with my other. And the question is, what now? What now? So that's what the reading was going to do. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you for those online. Gosh, it does make for a community. So I bow to you.
Namaste.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.